Howdy, Rex here.
Dante here.
We're going to talk about denominations today. Religious denominations. So which is the one true denomination?
Well, it's the one that I attend.
Of course. No, alright. So, there's really a paradigm. And if you don't know what a paradigm is, you should probably look that up. But one of the big paradigms is the denomination paradigm. That we have all kind of got sucked into, believing that there's these different entities that God recognizes based on stuff that man does. And in reality, the actual definition of church, according to God, is simply His group of people. That's the people who truly love and serve Him, who are His, who He has called according to His purpose, the ones that are saved, or whatever you want to call it. That is what the church really is. And the church paradigm is basically what we have created in our heads and in the historical context of the last 1700 years or so of this building with stained glass windows or a place with a sign above it where you have the singing people and then the guy goes up with the microphone and the robes and he talks. And that's what we think of when we think of church. But that is really a false paradigm. And the other paradigm is denominations. It is true that people like to arrange themselves, and we're kind of creatures of, we like to categorize things and, like define our parameters. We like to have everything to fit in a nice little box so that we're not scared. Because basically the unknown is scary to us, and we feel like we're in control when we ram stuff into these nice little packages that we have all set up in our brain for us. That's why we have denominations, or the denomination paradigm going on today.
Or there's a lot of disagreement.
Yeah, there's disagreement for sure. And it's only natural in any family to where there's going to be different perspectives of people. Like in any family, there's going to be people who have different angles on things, different experiences in life, different aspects of the relationship, different histories on each person. So the way that they communicate with their parents or their father, any member of the family, is going to be diverse. But that's no need for us to cause division into these various man-made little boxes that we've set up. Now, before we get too far, it is important to note that there are certain issues that are definitely worth, drawing a line of distinction, like, hey, we don't believe this, we do believe this. So I'm not saying we shouldn't pay attention to things that divide opinion, or like we shouldn't have disagreements or things like this. But the whole idea of structuring ourselves and separating ourselves in such a way is kind of a bad idea, because anything that's man-made as far as like our perspective on how things should be divided is kind of a bad idea, because our opinions are not always right. And the way our perspective is not God's perspective. God has His people all over the place. You go to any different denomination on earth, or even outside the denominations, where a lot of people fall into that category who don't even have a man-made denomination that even categorizes them. So we like to, try to think that those people are inferior based, upon the definitions that we've drawn up. But that's not how God looks at it. He's way above the whole thing. We're looking at it from down on the ground level. And just like any terrain on ground level, there's hills you're not going to be able to see behind. You're going down a river, you're not going to see what's around the corner. So our perspective and God's perspective are two different things. He's like way up here. He's in the helicopter or whatever, so he can see the whole landscape. So for us to categorize things and think that we got it figured out is just a bad idea right off the bat.
Well, and just like you were saying that there are some places where we should draw the line about whether Scripture says something or not or whatever.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that
we create our own little
you label a denomination based off that belief or whatever.
Yeah.
Because labeling or denominations aren't really laid out in Scripture themselves. Basically, you're with God or you're not with God.
Yeah, and really, if you look at how Jesus handled the whole deal, the Messiah, right? When He came here, there was religious denominations here as well. I mean, He dealt with Sadducees, which were usually trained over in Alexandria. They had their own set of ideas. They subdivided themselves in a little group. There was Pharisees who had a different way of looking at things. They had differences on certain things. He talked with Samaritans, who are kind of like they're the Jehovah's Witnesses of the day, kind of way off in their own little category. They're kind of appear to be weird to the other ones. And then there's a whole bunch of other groups, various denominations. There's the guys who follow John the Baptist around. Those are kind of the extreme radicals or whatever, you know. So there's all these different groups.
And then also just from the different tribes, I'm sure they sometimes disagreed. Or
yeah, each local synagogue was kind of its own little church group, if you will. And when he came, there's nothing recorded in the scriptures that he consistently approved of any particular denomination of his day. They were all equally messed up back then, just like they're all equally messed up today. And that's another thing to realize before we get too far into this discussion, is that history repeats itself, and the nature of the Bible, if you read it, is the history is like, it happens over and over and over again in a typology fashion. Like, it's established in the Jews as what happened to them is what's happening to us again today. And we're following the same exact mistakes, and that's why that stuff is written down, so we can learn from it, hopefully. Mm-hmm. So, all right. Now, it is true that if you are forced to think inside the box rather than outside the box, inside the box of denominations, that there are certain ones that I would agree with, certain points that one denomination may hold, or like I might find more in common with a particular denomination than I do with other ones. However, again, like I said, I'm not going to be so cocky as to think that I'm in the helicopter and I can see around the corner. So I just think it's a bad idea to invest too much energy and emotion and invest too much loyalty to any particular man-made religious denomination. Because, like I said, those things constantly change. And even like the Lutherans, or even the ones that claim they don't change, like the Catholics, if you look at it from a historical perspective and back up, I mean, even the last 50 years or 70 years, outfits like that have changed tremendously. And certain things that 100 years ago, those denominations would have said is like completely wrong, you look at today and they change their minds. Oh, well, that's fine. So they do change. And if that's the case, that it's changing, we know that from the Word of God, He said very explicitly, I never change. He's like constant 100% of the time. So it's us that's changing around because our perspectives are constantly changing as we learn new things, as we have new experiences, or as we become more corrupted. So that's important to keep in mind as well.
Just one thing, just like informing denominations, or just like as a general whole, we should just be very, cautious of that, or we should not try to fall into that of like forming denominations or binding ourselves to a denomination. Like that can be very dangerous.
Right. The way it really works is that God's true church, His actual people, you're going to find them spread all over the place. They're going to be wherever God put them. There might be more in one denomination than there are in a different one. That's possible. I don't know. That's not for me to decide. But it's based on individual relationship. It's not even so much based on an intellectual understanding or the official stated doctrine of any denomination being more correct. Because you can intellectually think that you got it all figured out, or you can even have it intellectually all figured out better than a different church. Oh, their doctrine is wrong, ours is good. Even if that's the case, I don't think that's the primary criteria that God is using to make His decisions on our relationship. It's really a personal heart-to-heart deal when it comes to God. And there's a lot of sweet old grannies who sit in some churches that a lot of people would consider to be just, they're all screwed up, who really, from their perspective, from what they know, who knows what kind of relationship they truly have. You know what I'm saying? So just because, and that's another danger of drawing those lines of distinction and putting on different uniforms that God never really mandated, is that we risk fighting with each other. It's kind of like on the,
Well, and sometimes we can start forming our own perceptions about a person because they go to a church, or because they even say they are of a denomination, because not everybody who attends a certain church may even hold to everything that...
You're going to find a huge diversity of people within any given church. I've visited all kinds of different denominations because I'm just curious, and I'm pretty open-minded. I want to learn as much as I can. I can chew the meat and spit out the bones. If they say something crazy, I can say, oh, that was crazy. And then, but I can wade around and I can learn stuff from people too. So it's not something that we have to get all... Because if you're going to spit out everything that, like, oh, this church said this one thing wrong, therefore they're all bad, well, you're not going to go to any church. You know what I'm saying? You're not going to have any fellowship with anyone because everyone's individual. I mean, most people are individual. They're going to have unique thoughts. They're going to have unique perspectives. So...
But yeah, like we can just be like, oh, you know, person A that goes to church such and such, and we might be like, oh, we might think in our minds, oh, therefore they must believe this, this, and this, and that might not be the true.
Yep.
So then, like, if we have these boxes, like, you can be like, you know, you can start believing something about somebody without even knowing.
Yeah, it's like a prejudice, a built-in prejudice, which is kind of funny because I think when the judgment comes and he reveals all the silly crap that we did, we're going to be like, oh man, I was a pot calling the pan black the whole time. I was doing stuff that I wasn't even aware of, that this other group was, you know, it's just a silly deal to arrange ourselves in such a fashion and then use it to attack each other. Think about like the Beach of Normandy, right? You got the Canadians and the Americans and all the Allied forces, all of them subdivided into different denominations or different units, right? And even if there are these different units, you're going to have local churches and local units. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Like in the Bible, you can read in Revelation about the letters to the churches. And they were usually, the denominations just fell in geographic area. Like to the church at Ephesus, all the people who love God in that region. That's who the fellowship was originally with. Okay? So it was based on that rather than ideological. And there were separations based on... different doctrine as well, but Paul actually recorded some of the stuff that happened there, and he kind of corrected those guys pretty good too. But think about the Beach of Normandy. So you got all these different denominations. You're invading Normandy, trying to fight the bad guys, right? And so you're all sitting on the beach, and all of a sudden, what if the Nazis would have convinced all the different units, like, hey, Alpha platoon over there, they're really stupid. I don't really like the way they're shooting their rifles, They should be holding it like a different way. So, and then we start exerting all our energy yelling at how they got it wrong.
Yeah, or they're using the wrong gun.
And then Bravo Company starts getting mad at Echo Company because like, oh man, I can't believe it, your captain's stupid. I remember one time he said this, and then all of a sudden we're all shooting bullets at each other when we're supposed to be shooting them that way. So as far as the fight is concerned, that's kind of a misallocation of valuable resources if you think about it. Okay? So that's just a general perspective of what we're dealing with. And it's really the enemy has kind of gotten into our brains and caused us to shoot way too much at each other. It's okay to have disagreements, and it's okay to try to refine each other's tactics and refine like what we believe. Man sharpens man like iron on iron. That's definitely true. But there's a time and a place for that. And at a certain point, you got to realize that they're still on your side. In some cases, they might not be. They might be an infiltrator, and there are lots of infiltrators out there too. So it's okay to call a spade, but generally speaking, we got to have the right focus.
God's people should spend more of their time and energy on sharing the Word of God rather than trying to discuss with each other or even argue with each other.
And we all have the same orders. We all have the exact same set of orders, and it's all right there in that collection of letters in the writings, the scriptures, right? The Bible, it's called the Bible. So we're all operating on the same orders. Everything that every religious Christian denomination is based on comes basically from this. There's some other outfits or denominations that, generally speaking, and I don't want to categorize them again, but there are other writings as well that some of them base it on. But generally speaking, we're all operating, we have the same commanding officer, the same, commander of operations, and that's the Almighty. So if we all have the same orders, we should at least be able to get that part straight. So, the question comes, all right now, when you're selecting a church, and this is why people ask about denominations, they want fellowship. It is important for us to have fellowship with other folks who are on board with us, because it's a tough world. And there's a lot of stuff out there, temptations. You're going to need to strengthen each other and operate as a cohesive unit in order to get anything done. So it is important to have fellowship and operate like that. However, the main thing that comes up, and the reason people ask about denominations, is because they're curious on which one should they go to. You know, you got a town and you got like 50 different churches to choose from, and which one do you pick?